Hello and welcome back to the Footy Frontline Podcast brought to you by my betting mate Nick D'urbano and Oliver Caffrey here to review a big round 11 and look ahead to round 12 in the AFL. Ollie, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Yeah, big round of footy again. Some big results. So, yeah, the season's starting to take shape almost halfway through now, which is pretty crazy. I can't believe I'm almost halfway through. But, yeah, the latter's starting to take shape.
Absolutely. And there were some big games over the weekend, a lot of huge talking points to dive into. And let's start with Sunday afternoon. Hawthorn defeated Brisbane at Marvel Stadium yesterday. Ended a bit of a good record for the Lions at Marvel, but Brisbane now 10 points outside the 8, a really disappointing loss heading into their second bye of the season this week. And Ollie, you were there yesterday. I mean, your thoughts on the game at Marvel Stadium?
Oh, absolute disaster for the Lions. Like, they just simply had to win that game. Hawthorn have just had the wood on them. It's probably a bit of a curse now, last 5 games dating back to 2020. So, yeah, I don't know what more they could have done yesterday. They could have done a lot more, but to go into that game knowing they've lost against the Hawks the last 4 times and nothing seemed to have changed, that was just a really bad performance coming off a really good last 3 weeks. They would have gone into that game at Marvel Stadium. They've lost to the Hawks in the past, the MCG, in Tasmania, but at Marvel Stadium, Hawks don't play there too often either. So the Lions should have won that game, and they do have a lot of injuries at the moment, but it wasn't their younger players not standing up yesterday. Kai Lohman, Logan Morris up forward looked really good, but yeah, Charlie Cameron just completely off his game at the moment. He had a really good game against Richmond the week before in that 119-point smashing, but yeah, his set shots and some of his misses early in the game really put the Lions under the pump. You're a forward, you're paid to kick goals, and he just didn't do that. Some of his kicking was just not up to AFL standard. He's completely off the ball at the moment and really needs to fix up whatever is going on with him at the moment. So, yeah, massive concern for the Lions. And, yeah, 10 points outside of the 8, as you mentioned. Even Chris Fagan, that was the first time this season that he's really conceded that they're really struggling now. And it's going to be a big effort in the second half of the season to maybe play finals. But at this stage, if you're not winning games against Hawthorn, like what hope have you got of playing finals? So it's probably going to be one of those seasons where they just miss out on the finals. They do have a lot of injuries, but so do a lot of teams at the moment, so that probably can't be used as too much of an excuse. And, yeah, Hawthorn, they're a good, honest team. Not a lot of talent in there, but they do have a crack every single week, so they will show you up if you don't come to play. And, yeah, the Lions were really made to pay in that second quarter especially, and then the last quarter as well. They had their chances in the third quarter, didn't quite convert. So, yeah, as a Lions fan yesterday, that was probably the most angry and frustrated I've been just sitting in the box. It was really hard to control the emotions yesterday. Most games you're okay when you're reporting, but that one was an exception yesterday. It was just absolutely frustrating. So I'm sure other Lions supporters would have felt similarly. And, yeah, a long way to go. But, yeah, it's hard to see them making finals from here.
I guess, has the bye come at the right time? But also, you know, when you look at what Carlton and GWS were able to do last season and what they were doing in the second half of the year, go on a bit of a run, make the 8 last year. Does it give you any solace, even with that extended injury list, that maybe Brisbane could turn things around post-bye?
Oh, potentially. Their best is still arguably the best in the competition, but they're just so inconsistent, even within games. Like, they had really good periods yesterday and then just completely got blown away by, yeah, a pretty average team for a long period. So, yeah, they're inconsistent within games, inconsistent week to week. So if they can play like they did against Gold Coast and Richmond last week, Richmond were not up to scratch last week, but the Lions were very, very good. Not a lot of teams would have done what they did. So, yeah, Chris Fagan actually did mention that in his presser yesterday that, yeah, Carlton and GWS were able to turn it around in the second half of last season, and sort of forgetting that Sydney did something similar as well. They were in the bottom 4 going into, I think, round 13 and were able to sneak into finals. Didn't have the success that GWS and Carlton did. But, yeah, there is history there that you can turn around. But, yeah, the way they're playing at the moment, they're just got to play more consistently from week to week. Otherwise, nothing's going to change.
Well, of course, Brisbane, one of 4 teams having the bye this week, along with North Melbourne, Sydney and GWS. The other side that also is in a bit of a dip at the moment, 4 straight losses now for Geelong after their defeat against GWS. We spoke about it last week being such a big game for both teams, having lost their last 3 games. Geelong, heavily fancied at home, lose again to GWS, a team that has had an incredible run down at Cardinia Park now for a while. But a big win for the Giants, who had to survive a little bit of a late onslaught. But, I mean, can Geelong turn this around after what's been an incredible last month after that brilliant start to the year?
History says they can, and I think just that club is so rock solid. They won't panic at all. But, yeah, Chris Scott would be getting a little bit nervous. Losing 4 in a row has not happened in his tenure at Geelong. 14 seasons, hasn't lost 4 games in a row up until now. And, yeah, you talk about bogey sides and hoodoos. Geelong has a bit of a thing going on against GWS. The Giants have won 4 in a row, dating back to 2019 at Cardinia Park. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Away teams winning down there. The first team to do that in more than 20 years, win 4 in a row against the Cats down there. It's such a hard place to win, and the Giants just seem to love playing down there. Geelong really had their chances in the last quarter. Probably should have pinched that one in the end. Giants got out to a 30-point lead, but yeah, Geelong, so many entries in that last quarter, completely dominated. And then Toby Green, as he does so many times, stood up, kicked the match winner out of nowhere. It was totally against the run of play. Geelong looked like they could have won that game by 4 or 5 goals, just the amount of dominance they had inside 50, but just couldn't convert. And yeah, some of the defenders from the Giants, they were getting a lot of plaudits this week, and so they should. Lee Collier, some of those marks, just incredible stuff. Like, he was really good in his post-game interview with Fox, just said, yeah, remember that for the rest of his life, those sort of efforts and winning down there. So, yeah, they've got a really good defence, GWS, and yeah, I've seen them do that a lot of times over the last few years, just hold on in the last quarter. Their defence just stacks up despite all those entries. So I think Geelong can turn it around. There's still enough talent in the team and enough talent to come back in, but yeah, you can tell in the middle now they're really missing Patrick Dangerfield in there. Their midfield just is a bit too young at the moment and got blown away by a really good midfield in GWS. And yeah, they're just missing that experience and yeah, just the power and explosive energy that Patrick Dangerfield brings. So if they can get Dangerfield back in there and get some of those more experienced guys playing better footy again, yeah, I think they can turn around. They should still play finals, but yeah, they're going to need to turn around pretty quickly. But yeah, Richmond next up on Saturday night, back at home. They're going to see that as an opportunity to get back into a bit of form, and they should do it by a big margin. You would think down there. Yeah,
even despite the improved showing from the Tigers on Saturday night against the Bombers, I mean, it's going to be so hard for them to go down the highway and beat the Cats. You'd think, they've never lost 4 in a row. Surely they're not going to lose 5 in a row. And it's going to be a big test for the Tigers down there. But Geelong, they really need to start to get their skates on to keep up with the sides that are starting to kick away and string together results. But let's have a look ahead to round 12. It all starts on Thursday night. It's a cracking contest at Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide against Carlton. The Blues, they won their first game at Adelaide Oval earlier this year in very controversial circumstances against the Dockers, but they're yet to beat a South Australian team at Adelaide Oval. Can they turn it around against the Power, who just did what they had to do down in Hobart, and then they blitzed North Melbourne? But Carlton, I mean, can they get a second straight win and get that win against the South Australian side at Adelaide Oval?
Yeah, it's going to be a really tough game. If this was in Melbourne at Marvel Stadium, MCG, you'd pick Carlton every single time, because I don't think Port Adelaide have been convincing at all. Just fell over the line against Hawthorn at home a couple of weeks ago. So lucky to win that game. And then, yeah, just did what they had to do against North Melbourne in Hobart. They just did what every team has done this season, win by 10 goals plus and put on 100 points on the board. So, yeah, nothing really stands out with Port Adelaide at the moment. They're third on the ladder, but we'll speak a bit about Essendon later on. But yeah, after Sydney, there's just a logjam of teams that are all about the same, I think. There's not really too much differentiate between those sides. So I think Port Adelaide, just because it's at home, that's the only reason why I think Port Adelaide win this game. Their midfield's really good. They'll match up pretty well against Carlton. It's midfield, obviously, with Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh just in terrific form. Just the forward line for Carlton, it could stand out, and Port Adelaide have had the defensive woes over the last few years. So Charlie Curnow gets going, then who knows? But yeah, maybe the streak will live on at the Adelaide Oval and the Blues will lose another one in the South Australian capital.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because Carlton, they did basically, when you look at the stats, they absolutely dominated Gold Coast, but they had to, do it the hard way. They only really kicked away late in that game, and a bit of a revelation of Zach Williams kicking 4 goals on the forward line. He'd been struggling in defence, struggling in midfield since making that much, vaunted move across from GWS back in 2020. I mean, this is a big game, for both these two sides looking to, make inroads, as you said, on Sydney and look to try and push into the top 4. I think the Power do handle business, though. I think at home, buoyed by that home crowd, they're just going to be a little bit too strong, but I don't think it's going to be by any stretch a convincing victory. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be, going right down to the wire, but I think they'll get the job done. But Paddy Cripps, as you mentioned, been in great form and looking good for 25-plus disposals in that game as well. Friday night, down at Marvel Stadium, Collingwood against the Western Bulldogs. Now, the Pies, another draw. It's 2 draws now this season. I mean, it's quite incredible to see how that one's playing out. And the Doggies, they were gallant against the Swans. They stuck with them. They had a bit of a late charge. Both teams, I'm sure, will be putting in some calls as well to the AFL about some key umpiring decisions late in the game. But probably if there's any chance for the Bulldogs to get a win against Collingwood, this is the perfect time. Collingwood with more injuries coming out of the game against Fremantle at Marvel Stadium as well. How do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, Collingwood, even though they drew that game and they definitely should have won, 25 points up, 7 minutes to go, shouldn't have drawn, but you take so many positives out of that game if you're Craig McRae, going over there with a really depleted team. So many of those younger guys stood up. Just really unheralded guys that were doing the job for them early on against the Dockers and, yeah, should have come away with that win. So I think back in Melbourne, they will get the job done. They're just a better structured team. They're more cohesive at the moment. The Bulldogs, bit like the Lions, are so up and down, really inconsistent within games as well. But yeah, a much improved showing despite losing against the Swans. They were a lot better than they have been in some of those bigger games this season when they have been pretty disappointing. So yeah, I think Luke Beveridge would have taken a bit out of that, pushing the ladder leaders all the way. But yeah, I think Collingwood, just because, they're looking like their 2023 selves again, despite all those injuries. So I think they'll get the job done.
It's tough for me to pick. I mean, I'm always going to back the Pies, but I think with all those injuries at the moment, Brody Myercheck with hamstring awareness, don't know exactly what sort of level of injury that is. Mason Cox out as well, and there's no one really coming back. I think only really Reef McInnes back from concussion. That and there's a few other players under injury clouds heading into this week as well. That probably does work in the Bulldogs' favour and it being at Marvel Stadium. But no Aaron Norton, no Ed Richards as well for the Bulldogs. Yeah. So, there's some big outs.
Still no
for
Libba.
them conversely. Yep. Yes, no Liberatore as well. So I'm going to back the Pies just. But it's going to be a game. It's going to be tight. I mean, if it was at the MCG, I'd feel a lot more confident backing in Collingwood, but I do think they just get the job done in this one. Josh Dacos looking good for 25 plus in this game as well. Saturday afternoon at the MCG, Hawthorn against Adelaide. This is actually a really tough game to predict because the Crows, they blitzed West Coast. I thought that the West Coast going to put in a much bigger effort, but you were on the money there, Ollie.
Eagles on the road, different team.
And should have stuck with how things have played out over the last 12 months when those two teams have played against each other. So it was a much-needed win for the Crows, but Hawthorn finding some momentum at the moment and really should have won their last 5 games, which is quite incredible after the starts of the season they've had. This is an interesting one to pick at the G because I don't think it's necessarily, one team looks like an overwhelming favourite going into this one at all.
Not at all. The Crows have had their issues on the road. They've been very gallant and they've lost a lot of close games on the road, especially at the MCG in the last 12 months. So that will be in the back of their head if it gets close or late. So, yeah, Hawthorn have really come into some pretty good form. Their midfield, Will Day has just been sensational since he come back from injury. He's been really good. Their forward line's looking pretty strong now. It was struggling early in the season, but yeah, Sam Mitchell's just got them playing some really, really good footy, just honest footy, just have a crack all the time. And yeah, they really learned a lot from that close loss against Port Adelaide because it was 25 points in the end against the Lions, but it was really close late and it looked like the Lions might be able to come over the top. But yeah, he spoke about it after the game, just said they had to watch the tape back of that Port Adelaide loss. And yeah, they learned 7 days later how to fix those issues. So yeah, they're just improving all the time, the Hawks. And I think just because it's at the MCG, I think the Hawks might get the job done. And yeah, be another really painful loss for the Crows on the road.
I think Adelaide actually win this one. I think they turn around that MCG run and they finally get one there, and I think that will put them in good stead. It's going to be tough. I mean, Hawthorn, as you said, coming in with a lot of momentum, and really they would back themselves to come away with a win here. But I think still the Crows, the form that they've shown really since that win against Carlton, puts them in really good stead, because conversely, like, you could argue that Adelaide probably should have won, what would it be, their last 7 games. You know, they were right in that game against Collingwood, the draw against Brisbane, the game against Essendon, where they probably should have had a free kick after the siren as well. So they've been in every game ever since that 0-4 start. And I think they go to the MCG and they come away with a win here and really start to put the pressure on the top 8. I think we're going to see a really improved Adelaide in the second half of the season and really start to make a run at finals. Jordan Dawson's been key to that, and I think he's going to be looking good for 30+ in this game as well. Saturday evening, these two teams desperate to bounce back, but it's funny because as much as West Coast lost by 99 points on the weekend, they go in as the favourites up against the Saints, who are just in a hole at the moment. They're in an absolute rut. I thought they'd bounce back against Melbourne and show a little bit of something. They were in the game at halftime, but then just got blitzed in the second half, and they're just in the pits at the moment. A team that was back to play finals this year, they go on the road to play West Coast too, despite their record being exactly the same as St Kilda's. At least there's a bit of a glimmer of hope in the tunnel for them, which is amazing to think given where West Coast were only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, West Coast back at home, starting favourites. Not too many times over the last 3 seasons you could say that they're starting pretty clear favourites, really. $1.78 for the Eagles at the moment. The Saints, $2.08, but I'd throw that even further. Just the Eagles should be even bigger favourites, considering they've beaten Melbourne at home, they've beaten Fremantle at home. They've had some really good wins there this season, and yeah, they're just a different team at home. They're just big dog, little dog meme. Like big dog at home and little dog on the road. They're just a completely different side. It's amazing. And Harley Reid, he's sort of mirroring the team at the moment. He's put in some spellbinding performances at home in front of the home fans, in front of the Western Australian newspaper journalists who will be loving another week of back pages. So I think it's pretty comfortable that the Eagles will get the job done, because St Kilda, as you mentioned, have been just horrible in the last month. They have just gotten worse. It's staggering, because they've got players back. They're dealing with injuries early in the season, and that hasn't fixed anything. So many of their good players completely out of form. They're not playing exciting footy at all. It almost looks like they're tanking. It's just incredible to watch how bad they're performing at the moment. They're so much worse than they were under Brett Ratton, who the Saints said, okay, you're underperforming. You took us to finals once. You got us in a bit of a mid-table sort of position, but you're not getting us any further. But they are far worse than they were a couple of years ago. Really good season last year from the Saints, but have completely fallen away. And just the indictment on Ross Lyon's coaching at the moment. And it doesn't look like there's any way out, because they're just not scoring. They're not playing with any. They've got a lot of quick players in their team, but they're not playing with any dare. They're not taking the game on. It's just gone back to the 2008-9 sort of coaching, but they don't have the cattle to pull it off. And it's a different era. You can't play that defensive footy when everyone's sort of more going attacking in 2024. So I think the Eagles win this convincingly, really. Yeah. The way they just pummeled Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, if they're doing that to a finals contender, potentially a premiership contender, what are they going to do to St Kilda? So I think the Harley Show will be back on Saturday afternoon and should provide plenty of highlights for the fans.
Yeah, I think West Coast win this game quite convincingly. I'm actually heading over to watch that game on Saturday. I'll be in Perth for the weekend.
Oh, right.
I'm actually going to get to see the Harley Reid show in the flesh. I'm looking forward to seeing how that one plays out. Yes, it's almost like a concert of itself. So I've actually tipped him to kick multiple goals in this game as well, because we saw how well he played against Melbourne a few weeks ago. And you said it, taking on a premiership contender, they were unfazed and they were brilliant in that game. Taking on a St Kilda team that are just rock bottom right now. And I know the ladder says it maybe a little bit differently, but almost if you did a bit of a power rankings of the 18 teams, they're probably 17th right now, just above North Melbourne.
Yeah,
so they just look, as you said, they can't winning score, barely kick over 70 points at the moment, which is just an incredible place to be in for the Saints. I think West Coast win this game quite easily at Optus Stadium. Saturday night, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, down at GMHBA Stadium, Geelong taking on Richmond. It's interesting to see this game being played back in Geelong. I mean, for many years, this was up at the G, big crowds and everything, but goes to show how the tides turn. I think the last time these two teams played each other would have been in 2017 when they were making a big hoo-ha about the game being in Geelong. But now the game's back here. It kind of shows where, in all due respect, how things have changed over the last few years. But despite Richmond's spirited performance against the Bombers, they go in as huge underdogs. The bookies are not favouring them one little bit, despite the Cats not winning in their last four. I mean, Geelong should win this game quite easily.
Yeah, Adam Muse said after the Lions lost that it was rock bottom, but I can see this getting really, really ugly down there. Geelong are going to be super fired up. They've lost 4 in a row, 2 at home, back in front of the home fans again. They're just going to smell blood in this one. Richmond were so impressive on Saturday night in Dreamtime. Their better players stood up. Dustin Martin looked like he was back to his old self. He was sensational, and a lot of the other players were. But, yeah, I think maybe it was sort of their grand final on Saturday night, the Tigers. All their guys got up for that, but there could be a bit of a dip this Saturday night, having to make the big trip down the highway they haven't done for 7 years.
Yes.
So unfamiliar territory for the Tigers, and I don't think Dustin Martin would like playing in front of 30,000 or whatever it is down there compared to 80, 90,000 at the G. Only gets himself up for the big games these days, and I can't see this turning out too well for the Tigers. I think Geelong bounced back in pretty big fashion, and it could be 12, 13 goals plus, I reckon.
Yeah, it's quite disappointing because, as you said, Richmond were right in that game. I mean, they had so many chances early in the last quarter to make the game make it a 1-goal game. I remember that Noah Cumberland chance down the top of the goal square. If he kicks that, it's a 1-goal game with about 15 minutes to go, and Richmond have all the momentum.
Shai Bolton going off. He's going to be out for this game as well. But, that was arguably a turning point. Foul coming in and just cleaning up his own teammate. He's a freight train. That would have hurt so much.
Absolutely.
So he went out of the game, and Richmond barely got it down there for the rest of the time he was off. So he's obviously a great player. Stood up when he'd been down the last few weeks. So, he's a massive out.
Absolutely. And I think the Cats just said win this game quite easily. I've still tipped Dusty to kick multiple goals, but that could just be 2 goals. So, I think either way, regardless of how they've had their scoring woes, I still think Dusty will kick 2 in this one. And I think the Cats, though, will win this game quite easily. Sunday in Alice Springs, Melbourne against the Dockers. The D's, they dealt with St Kilda quite easily in the second half yesterday, and the Dockers, well, they showed a lot of spirit coming back from 25 points down to get a draw against the Pies. Feels weird saying coming back to getting a draw. It feels like we're talking about the round ball for a second, but this is a big one here for both teams. I mean, Fremantle wanting to take that momentum from, what was a really gutsy last quarter performance against the Pies, but Melbourne, a really good chance for them to get some momentum after that win against the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good second half from the Demons, just powered away, and would have got a bit of confidence back after they were really humbled the week before against West Coast, and have lost a few games this season they probably shouldn't have, and would like their time again. But I think being in the NT, they've played a few games there now, and they should get the job done against the Dockers because Fremantle really should have won that game on Friday night. I know you could say Collingwood should have won that game as well. I said that earlier, but Collingwood got in front by 25 points, but Fremantle should have never let that happen. Just completely understrength Collingwood side. I think they had 6 guys under 10 games or something ridiculous like that. So the Dockers at home should have taken full advantage. And I just don't. It's going to be a really low scoring game, this one. Both teams have been struggling to score. Fremantle play that defensive style of footy that doesn't get you big scores. So, Christian Petrarca's been on fire. Max Gawn was amazing again. And, it'd be a really good duel between Max Gawn and Luke Jackson, Sean Darcy. Should be a ripping contest there in the middle. Both midfields are sensational, arguably, top 4 in the competition. But, left a bit desired forward of the footy. So, I think the Demons get up.
Well, when Melbourne were there last, they played that weird, windy, wet and wild game against GWS, which GWS won by a goal, which sparked their season into life. I mean, this is going to be another interesting one just to keep an eye on what the conditions are like in Alice Springs, because there's been sometimes some blowouts, but there's also been some real low scoring, in the mud sort of games there. So I think Melbourne will win this game in Alice Springs. Christian Petrarca looking good for 25 plus in this game as well. Final game of the round, 4 p.m. on Sunday, Gold Coast against Essendon at People First Stadium. So the Suns back at home where they haven't lost this season. They had a great chance to really, make a bit of a statement against the Blues. They fell short, but they're back at home against the Bombers, who are flying at the moment. Well, look, they're flying getting results. They haven't been necessarily the most convincing of results, but there's still wins on the board.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the Suns are a red-hot crack here. I actually think they're going to beat the Bombers on Sunday night. I think they should go in with a lot of confidence as well on their home deck.
Oh, I think they'll definitely win.
Yeah.
Being at home, spoke about West Coast before about being a different side at home. The Suns are as well. Performances they've put in on the Gold Coast and in Darwin, been light years away from what they've dished up on the road. So, Essendon, they've had a good run, but I think it's going to come to an end in convincing fashion for the Suns on Sunday night. This is probably after the Thursday night game. This is probably the second best game of the round.
Yeah, I think
Should be an absolute cracker up there if Essendon play the sort of footy they've done all season. And, the Suns at home, they were good for periods against the Blues, but, I never really saw them winning that game just because Carlton needed to have a response, and being at home, they were probably always going to do it. But, Damon Hardwick, I think, would have them revved up for this one. Being at home, take on the second place teams. I think, the Suns will continue their winning streak at People First Stadium. They're turning into a bit of a fortress.
Yeah, and Damien Hardwick's very rarely lost against the Bombers. I think he's one of his last games, or was his last game as Richmond coach?
It was his very last game.
Yeah, it was the first loss in Dreamtime in many, many years. So
he thought, that's it, I'm losing the Bombers, so I've completely lost the plot, I've got to get out of here.
Yeah, and now he has the chance to right the ship here. I mean, he's obviously a former Essendon premiership player as well, but a good chance for the Suns, and I think they come away with the win. Jake Stringer, though, looking good for multiple goals. He's been in great form as of late, and I think he's going to carry that form over to Queensland. Ollie, time for us to wrap up. Thank you again for watching here for the Footy Frontline podcast. We'll be back next week to review all the round 12 action and look ahead to round 13. Enjoy the weekend in football.